one of the arguments that just won't go away is the idea of functional training. And it is just so aggravating. I've talked so much about fitness. I mean, look, outside of martial arts, I mean, the general fitness and fitness adjacent stuff has been a major area of my training. And like I've said this before, it's what I went to school for. Despite the fact that I didn't finish my degree, the fact is that I went to school for it and I haven't stopped studying it. I literally left school so I could work, and because I figured, well, I can, become a personal trainer without needing to, needing a degree. I can get a certificate without it. So like it wasn't a requirement for my career path, and I needed to work because I was newly married and had bills to pay. And so the point is that I know a little bit of something about fitness. Look, I'm not a PhD level guy. Right? There are plenty of people that know a lot more than me, but I've developed a toolkit of where to look and who to listen to, and all of that. And when I hear people talk about, well, you got to do this instead of that, famously, people are still stuck on the idea of, well, if you lift with barbells, you're not going to be, fighting fit, and it's just not true. People come up with all of these kind of, I don't want to abuse the word theory. Theory doesn't mean a guess, right? Most people are talking about hypotheses, not theories. Theories are actually supported by evidence and logic, sometimes in lieu of direct evidence. But the point is that theory is not a hypothesis. They're two different things. The point is that people come up with these kind of hypotheticals of, well, if so-and-so did this, they would be better, stronger, faster, whatever. But the fact is that when we actually go about studying stuff, we find that there's either no benefit or no unique benefit to training non-standardly. Now, that does come with a small caveat, right? And that small caveat is the fact that your body does need to get used to moving in certain movement patterns, because movement patterns require specific neural pathways, and those neural pathways have to be built over the course of practice. Right. And so, not to sound too much like Mark Ripito, but the fact is that practice does need to be separate from training to a large degree. You can't do, strength training with your movement practice at the same time and expect things to flow together, because they really don't. What you end up with is a worst of both worlds scenario as opposed to a best of both worlds scenario. And so, what we need to look at is the fact that, like, on the one side, you need to practice your skills, and you need to practice your skills fairly specifically. We have some reasonable data out there, such as loading your skilled movement beyond about 20% of the working load of whatever the task is, fundamentally changes the movement pattern. Now, does that mean it is completely and utterly not going to have any crossover effect? Well, no, but the point is that it becomes less specific. Overloading or underloading your skilled movement makes it less specific, and therefore is going to have less transfer. Not none, but less. And you also have to understand that by loading skill work, you are also not going to be maximally loading the tissues to build up actual physical strength, nor are you going to be practicing the skill movement at correct speed and tempo and whatnot. And so again, it's kind of a worst of both worlds kind of scenario. Let's also get something down, right? And I talked about this before on our big conditioning video. Endurance is not the same thing as strength. Not at all. So doing something that makes you very tired because it demands a lot from you energetically, metabolically, is not the same thing as actually lifting a maximal load. And when we look at what strength is, right, strength is fundamentally definable by your ability to produce force. Like the way we measure strength in humans, i.e., through moving against resistance, is your ability to produce force against that resistance. That's what it is. Power, of course, adds the speed/time component to that. So force and power, right? Strength and power, those are in that camp, right? Being able to produce force and being able to produce force quickly. Endurance, right? So on the one side, stamina, your work capacity, your ability to do something, right? And then endurance is kind of like your threshold for punishment. It's kind of a yin and yang there. That's something completely different. And in that sense, right, in the sense of strength kind of has a yin and yang too, because in material strength, it's just the ability to resist load, not necessarily to move load, right? And that's why force and resistance are two separate things. But the fact is that like your ability to take and resist force is kind of one side versus your ability to produce force is another side. We would kind of call both of those strength because one is material strength and the other one is, well, force production, but human strength, right? And then, like I said, there's power. And that's just being able to produce that force quickly. And then there's your endurance and your stamina. And like they're all interconnected to a degree, but they are separate things. And this idea of measuring somebody's strength in the most nebulous abstract term, measuring somebody's strength by one of these other measures is just shoddy science, really. And I understand it when we use it metaphorically, talking about strength, character, emotional strength, stuff like that. Because those have the connotation of resisting force. You don't really have that with the other measures in the physical realm, right? And so look, doing calisthenics is great, and I think that you can get the majority of what you need, strength-wise, power-wise, endurance and stamina-wise, from calisthenics. However, they're not better, i.e. they don't produce better results than lifting a barbell. However, I will say this, right? Like if you look at barbell medicine, Doctors Feigenbaum and Baraki, one of the things that they've talked about before is the fact that their team has started putting a little bit of emphasis for the general population on doing isolateral work, one side of the body at a time. The idea being that people get so stuck on the big three movements, the normal strength movements, that they kind of forget the fact that their bodies do need to move in multiple directions. But again, that's kind of a practice issue. Because our bodies respond and adapt fairly specifically, then if you're only good at squat, bench, and deadlift, well, you're only good at squat, bench, and deadlift, and you're going to have trouble doing other things. One of the reasons that people can get so strong doing those is that they specialize in them, which means that they are able to put much more of their energy and recovery into focusing on that. For those of us involved in martial arts and other athletics, we have to split that energy with cardio and conditioning and skill work and whatnot. And, most people are not. Well, I got interrupted and I couldn't finish the video at the gym. So here we are a little bit later, back in my home office, and I figured I would just finish the video here instead of completely reshooting it, because I don't think there was anything wrong with what I was saying. Now, I'm probably not going to be able to pick up exactly where I left off. So let's just get into this basic concept here, since we're talking about the idea of functional training and what's wrong with it. The biggest thing that is wrong with functional training is that it is often focused on what you would consider like physical therapy kind of movements. Now look, if you are trying to identify and fix problems with certain joint angles and movement patterns and certain weaknesses or imbalances and whatnot, that is all fine. But there is nothing non-functional about being generally strong, about having generally good endurance, cardio, stamina, etc. There's nothing non-functional about any of the training. Any training that produces a result that you intend to produce is functional. So first off, we're getting to this point where people are using language just as an attack vector as opposed to being precise in what they mean. And second of all, the fact is that they're just generally wrong in their approach, because you're not going to make somebody a better athlete by making them less strong but more precise in their specific movement that isn't being so specific because you're loading that movement. It doesn't make sense. If we know that you are going to get a less specific movement transfer by resisting what would be a normal skilled movement, and we know that you're not going to get the strength adaptations that you would get were you just working regular strength and hypertrophy protocols, then you are not going to be getting the results that you're looking for by doing functional training, by doing weird things on unstable surfaces, or by going through therapy movements. Like those things, they have their place. Well, maybe not the unstable thing. The unstable surfaces thing has really not proven any benefits. Maybe we'll find more studies later. But really the thing is that you cannot claim something is happening when you don't have any actual evidence to back it up. And this is one of the biggest problems with the functional training crowd, is they will claim things about injury and imbalance and weakness and stuff like that based on rather spurious connections that don't have any research backing them up. And look, we understand that research is limited and much of the research is flawed and downright wrong. We understand that. But the fact is that if you do not have hard evidence of something, you can't just make up or decide on your favorite hypothesis as the result. I mean, one of the big ones, oh man, and look, I fell for this one at one point too, but it's just like, if you think about it for 5 seconds, it goes away pretty fast. And that is the sense that a lot of people will say, well, if you move super slow and you just burn out all of the motor units of all the muscle fibers, then all that's left is the connective tissue. Well, here's the problem with that. Connective tissue is non-contractile. Connective tissue does not produce movement on its own. It responds to movement. It connects your muscles to your bones. It connects everything together. It sheathes your muscles, like technically speaking, like your bones are connective tissue too. And but the thing is that it itself is non-contractile, meaning that it does not produce movement on its own. It can't produce movement on its own, which means that you're not burning out all of the motor fibers when you move ultra slow, and it doesn't mean that you're going to be training the connective tissue. In fact, what we do know about connective tissue, and this is kind of interesting, is that it needs stretch in order to develop, because connective tissue is meant for, it's a suspension mechanism, right? It's like an elastic suspension mechanism, for lack of a better term. And so it needs to be stretched. And I mean, that's why, like, you're working your tendons when you're working your muscles, because when your muscles are contracting, those tendons are getting stretched between the connection point at the muscle and the connection point on the bone, and they're working. Your ligaments are going to be under stretch when you move through ranges of motion. Your fascia is going to be under stretch, when you move through ranges of motion. Like, your bones are going to be, now your bones aren't going to be stretching, your bones are going to be under compressive load, but your bones are going to be under load when you do regular resistance training. Your bones, and we have evidence of this, resistance training increases bone density. So the point is that you're not going to be able to specifically target like the neglected fibers by doing weird esoteric exercises. And again, if you want to do certain things like physical therapy type movements that are designed to kind of seek and destroy, movement issues and weakness issues in very specific joint angles and movement patterns, so be it. I mean, that's useful, right? Just going back to what we mentioned about barbell medicine, right? Doing some of that stuff can be of value, right? If you notice that you are particularly unbalanced when holding a load or whatever, then you might want to address that. Not because we actually have any evidence that imbalance is harmful, because we don't actually have any evidence in that regard, but you might consider it from an efficiency standpoint. If you are not distributing load evenly amongst both sides or the whole of the muscle groups that are being used, then you might need to go in and address those things. And we talk about this in like powerlifting and weightlifting all the time. People go through, the big 3 lifts or the big 2 if you're doing weightlifting, and you practice those lifts as skills, right? You practice your maximal load, you practice, singles, doubles, triples, and then you do all sorts of accessory work to build muscle and get practice and develop the movement patterns. And oftentimes you're going to be doing specific accessory exercises for specific weak points in your lifts to bring those weak points up. And that is really, really important to do if you want to get really good, is you identify points where you have weaknesses and you bring those up. That's not specific to functional training. That is just how good training works. And again, it has nothing to do with something like standing on an unstable surface and doing, and doing some exercise. It has nothing to do with trying to specifically target your connective tissue. It has nothing, to do with loading your skill movements. In fact, if you are using a robust set of compound movements, which would be the most common movements in powerlifting, weightlifting, and strongman even, in CrossFit, if you're using those big compound movements, squats, bench presses, overhead presses, rows, deadlifts, I mean, this is kind of your 7 basic movement patterns kind of things, right? And you're working those things through big ranges of motion. And then on top of that, you're addressing single joints through like your hypertrophy work and whatnot, and you're addressing those single joints, and specifically even doing isolateral or unilateral, depending on which term you prefer, work, you're going to be getting that benefit. And if you use that specifically to build up your strength and your general, your athletic performance and your muscular build, your structural, integrity and all that, and then you practice your skill work on top of that separately, but on top of that, then you're going to be getting your strength and conditioning. And yeah, you might need to do cardio separately even from skill work, right? So you might have to have a matrix of strength and, endurance, stamina, and skill kind of all rotating and flowing in and amongst themselves. I mean, that's kind of the idea of the conjugate method or concurrent training, is kind of making almost like a braided rope of these things that allow you to make them bind together and work together as a unit, as a bundle of things, as opposed to a single thing. But, for the most part, functional training just isn't. It is just a weirdly esoteric, bunch of mumbo jumbo designed to make you feel like you're doing something better than you are, to get results that are probably not going to be doing much of anything differently or better than you would get if you were just doing regular strength and conditioning and practicing your skills. And quite honestly, you might be getting subpar results, because by trying to mix those things together at the same time, you are often just getting worst of both worlds. So hopefully that clears that up. I know this argument's just not going to go away, but anyway, I will talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share. Check us out on our other socials, and please head over to blacksunboxing.com to get a little more info, including how to contact us. Furthermore, if you are in the Phoenix area, please feel free to stop in, say hi, join in for a class, whatever. Also, if you ever see us cite sources or just for additional content, please check out our Substack. That is where we put all of the sources we use in our videos and is a major part of this. Plus, it serves as a membership platform for long distance learning and for people who would like to support us but aren't local. We would greatly appreciate it if you signed up. Even just the free membership helps us out a lot. All right, I will see you guys in the next video. Good journey.